Right, well, we're looking at a map of the area with a handful of medieval building sites. This isn't all the sites there are. There are other sites, including several quite notable parish churches, such as St Cuthbert's Darlington. But this is a handful of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 interesting buildings. I'm just going to say a little bit about. So we'll work our way through them. Here we are, right here we're going. Bishop Middleham Castle. This was, as the name suggests, one of the fortresses belonging to the Bishop of Durham. It was never really a castle, quite a nice strong site, but more of a fortified manor house. And later in the medieval period, Bishop Auckland Castle grew into a much larger establishment, so Bishop Middleham got left behind a bit. We can see here a reconstruction. It's on a promontory on the Magnesian limestone, and it appears to have been a walled enclosure without pretenses of any great strength, with a gatehouse and a hall and various other buildings. It hasn't been studied in great detail. We've shown a chapel there as well, although there was a substantial parish church just sort of off the near side of the frame. So that's Bishop Middleham Castle. Needs a lot of research, needs accurate survey. And just again off frame to the north, there's an extensive set of farm buildings that are post-medieval in parts, probably 17th, 18th century. All what's left of the castle are a few lengths of low wall, and there was a hunting park attached to it, of which some lengths of wall survive as well. It hasn't been studied in the depth that it really should have been, but an interesting site and to watch this space. Right nearby is another medieval memorial site. Again, it's never really been studied. This is Great Isle. It's out in the marshes in the head of the River Skerne. It's the medieval home of the Delisle or the Insular family, and later passed to the Tempests, who are quite a well-known northeastern family. And it's described by Surtees. He talks about the wreck of the old manor house with projecting gavels, narrow lights divided by stone mullions, and the ruins of gardens and orchards. And again, it's late medieval in parts. So we'll see on the next frame, there is a building called the chapel, that has a series of late medieval windows. Problem is, any old building with Gothic style windows, people tend to call a chapel. The farmhouse in the middle here is quite interesting, though I don't think it's ever been looked at archaeologically in detail. There are buildings around 4 sides of the courtyard. The building on the left here, the single story range, that's the so-called chapel. And here it is inside. As you can see, there are certainly late medieval, late 15th, maybe early 16th style windows. There are 4 of those. Could have been a chapel. So well lit, I tend to think it could have been a long gallery. Some of these late medieval houses had a gallery for perambulation, very well lit with large windows. And you've got this range of great big windows, and that's all you can tell about it. But again, the whole buildings need studying in detail. We've done no more than being able to glance at this, I'm afraid. And here is again a very, very complicated one. This is Walworth Castle, right down in the south of the area, not very far from the Tees. It was the medieval seat of the Hansard family who were important. Then passed in the 16th century the Ayscots, then the Jennisons, remodeled by Ralph Jennison around 1740, then to the Aylmer family, owned by Durham County Council, got knocked around a bit, I'm afraid, as a school in the mid-20th century. And since the 1980s, it's been a hotel. Interesting building. As you see it now, looks like a big Elizabethan house with these twin towers at the bottom corners. It looks as if it's a composition of one date. It looks a bit like Lulworth Castle down on the south coast with these simple round towers. It's more than that. There's an earlier building incorporated in here. And I think the left hand, that's the southwest tower, is actually late medieval. Here's a plan. You can see, interesting thing to see on there is about a third of the way along that south facade, just beyond the first of the two drain pipes, you can see the angle coins, the southeast corner of an early range of buildings there. So that might have been the solar with the tower attached, and then the hall beyond. And I think the right-hand tower is a later addition. When you have a look at it, it seems to have thinner walls. The plans we've been given here are architects' plans, and architects aren't always as concerned with the thickness of walls as architects ought to be. So they could be a bit misleading. As I say, it's a very, very complex fabric. You can see even from the way there that there's a kink in the plan. The south range is set quite skewed to the rest. Presumably it's earlier, it could be later. I suspect the south range is the medieval manor house, and then the remainder is probably 16th century. But that southwest tower has got gun loops, which is interesting as well, which would again suggest a date of late 1400s, 1500-ish. There they are. Really quite interesting. Probably practical rather than sort of just a bit of architectural trimming. So they're rare. There are gun loops in the tower of Dilston Castle near Corbridge, thought to date from the 1480s. It could be a similar period. So again, a very interesting building, but one that definitely has not been studied. And then on the north side, looking out over a courtyard. Now the courtyard's had a modern lounge built into it, so you've got to look above that roof. But you've got this frontage, which is very much Elizabethan. It's quite definitely classical, later 1500s, with those three orders of attached shafts and things. It's really architecturally, that's really quite, it's been knocked around a lot. As you can see, there are block windows, but it's quite a notable piece. It's been altered. There's big Venetian stair windows, bottom center, and then first floor left. And then you can see there's, a lot's happened. There's been mullioned windows, probably 16th century, altered in the 18th century. Then a piece of balustrading. But it would be worth drawing that if we get at it properly. Also at Walworth was quite a large medieval village, of which very little survives other than very extensive earthworks. And there was a village green. Actually, the plan is quite like Heineken, which isn't very far away, which has a green with a separate little, maybe a bond gate, an enclosure off one corner. But in the centre of the green at Heineken is St Michael's Parish Church. In the centre of the green at Walworth is a 12th century chapel, which is still there as a barn. It's been very knocked around, but the building is there. Here's some details. You can see the south doorway, that's on the inside, 12th century south door survives in the south wall. Then further east in the same wall is an aumbrey and a nice little trefoiled medieval piscina. And there's also remains of the east window in the east wall and traces of a window in the west wall. Very simple building, simple rectangle in plan. Doesn't seem to have a chancel, just a rectangle. And not very far away, at Houghton aside, is a very fine medieval dovecote. It's one of a group in the Tees Valley. There's one at Headlam beside Headlam Hall. There's one beside Gainford Hall. There's a ruined one at Barford, just over the river from Gainford, about a mile to the south. Another one on the south at Caldwell. And there was one, I believe, at Low Conscliffe, because in the 1960s, some local folks did an excavation there and found the foundations of a circular building, which from its size and wall thicknesses can only really have been a dovecote. One more. This is again a very fine building. This was a manor house of the Archdeacons of Durham, not very far from Darlington. Archdeacon Newton. There are village earthworks there, which have now been excavated in part. But there is one substantial medieval building, which is the service wing of the medieval hall. It survives as a barn. It's had a bit of a checkered history. Apparently, there was a bad fire in the early 20th century. So there's very little in the way of timber or internal features left. And the shell of it is medieval but remodeled 1600-ish. It's got some good features. There it is on the plan. You can see it had a gym gang added, which is now gone. So it served as a barn over much of the last century or more. But these big buttresses are they're earlier. They're probably 14th century. There's a very, very similar building, almost identical in dimensions and in some details, at Easington. That's another archdiaconal manor house at Easington, over towards the coast on the east side of County Durham. Here we are inside. Quite a few of the features you can see inside actually date from the 17th century. There's a couple of good big fireplaces. The roof is all 20th century. If we can go back, oh no, right now, it should have an exterior. Yes, on the exterior here, I was going to show you, say this was the service wing of the hall. The hall stood on the side here, and here are very nicely molded jambs of doorways, and there were a pair of porches. The entrance to the main hall was a passage across here. You could turn left into the service wing or right into the hall, but there was a porch here, an inner doorway there, another doorway there, and these doorways survive at the Easington Manor House. You can see exactly the same arrangement. So yeah, there's the inside. There are two more to deal with. This is Horton-le-Sterne, which has a very good medieval church, but the old rectory just over the road from the church. The earlier part is called Butler House, and that is a much altered medieval building, mostly brick on the outside, but when you get inside, there's remains of a 14th century crown post roof. And here, this is the north side of the building, courtyard, and this is the main rectory building, which is early 1700s, brick, nice Georgian house. But on the far end here, this is the end of a range continuing behind here. This has been the end of a solar range, and there are windows tucked up against the far west end of the north wall, which clearly looked round a hall block. So this big Georgian block replaces a medieval stone hall. And this is the medieval wing. This end's been extended, but this section here, which is seeing here, this has a medieval crown post roof and one nice 15th century window. You can just about see surviving there with two arch lights. To finish with Wesso Grange, sad story. I knew this one when I was young, and I did draw and survey it and record it in some details. It has been written up, but the farmers decided to pull it down about 20 30 years ago. Interesting building, locally said to be a chapel. We saw there's a great eye. It's got Gothic windows. People call it a chapel. I think it was always a house, probably 16th century. It wasn't a manor house. Quite interesting. I think it was sort of quite a high status vernacular house. It had a truncated principal roof, which is a very characteristic late medieval Durham roof type, which seems to be associated with these vernacular yeoman houses. But there's the west end of the building with a pair of square-headed windows on the ground floor, then one on the first floor with two round-headed lights. Here's a plan of it. This was the building up here. Then there was a square of buildings here. This was probably the hall. A nice timber doorway surviving here, and an oven in the wall there. There's probably a fireplace there. Other buildings there, which are more or less gone. And then the parlour here had remains of wall paintings. It was really quite an important building. It was listed, but it got pulled down, and as far as I know, there were no repercussions. The guy got away with it, as often. And here we are inside. Here's the fireplace on the south side of the wing, and you can see with the remains of wall paintings. Can you see these curved motifs here on the wall above it? So quite interesting remains of presumably 16th century paintings. Then in the east wall of the hall block was this very, very nice round arched doorway surviving, which is presumably the original front door, the original hall. But sadly, it's gone now. And there's its roof. It had these truncated principal trusses where you have a tie beam, then a pair of heavy principals that only go as far as the collar. And they carry an upper pair of purlins, and there's no ridge above that. That's a very distinctive County Durham type. We've managed to dendrite. Martin Roberts has done quite a bit of work on these. We've managed to dendrodate them mostly to the 15th and early 16th century. Right.